Keisha stands in Dana's office, trembling, staring at the termination papers on the desk. Her manager's cold smile burns into her memory. Just 24 hours ago, she'd given her last $20 to help a stranded old man in the pouring rain. Now she's losing everything. Donna's voice cuts through her shock, listing complaints that sound rehearsed, accusations that feel planted. Through the office window, Keisha notices someone entering the diner, an elderly man, the same man from last night, walking straight toward them with unexpected purpose. The storm had come out of nowhere the evening before, turning the sky black at 6:47 in the afternoon. Keisha was finishing her second shift of the day at Riverside Diner, her feet screaming in her worn sneakers, her uniform clinging to her skin from 16 straight hours of hustling between tables. She counted her tips in the back room with hands that shook from exhaustion, $33 in crumpled bills and loose change, knowing it wasn't nearly enough. Her mother's diabetes medication cost $240, and the pharmacy had already called twice about the overdue refill. Keisha stuffed the money into her apron pocket and pushed through the back door into the downpour, rain hitting her face like cold needles. The parking lot was nearly empty, water pooling in the potholes, and she was about to make a run for the bus stop when she noticed him. An elderly white man in an expensive suit was struggling on the sidewalk about 30 feet away, one hand pressed against the brick wall of the hardware store, the other reaching out as if searching for something to steady himself. His silver hair was plastered to his head, and even from a distance, Keisha could see he was disoriented. She hesitated, her mind flashing to the last time she'd tried to help someone in this town, when Mrs. Henderson's son had accused her of trying to steal his mother's purse when she was just trying to return it. She glanced at the street where two other people walked past the old man without stopping, their umbrellas tilted against the wind, their eyes deliberately avoiding him. The rain was getting heavier, and Keisha could see the man was shaking. She thought about her mother waiting at home, about the medication, about the fact that she needed every single dollar in her pocket. But her feet were already moving toward him before her brain could talk her out of it. She approached cautiously, her voice raised over the sound of the storm. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need help?" The man turned to her, his face pale and confused, his eyes struggling to focus. He opened his mouth but seemed unable to form words at first. Finally, he managed to speak, his voice weak and unsteady. "I was at a meeting. My driver. I don't know where. No phone? No wallet." He swayed slightly, and Keisha quickly moved closer, ready to catch him if he fell. She noticed his hands were trembling badly, not just from the cold but from something else, something that sent alarm bells ringing in her head. She'd seen those symptoms before when her uncle had his heart attack 3 years ago. The rain was coming down so hard now that she could barely see across the street, and the temperature seemed to be dropping by the second. The old man was wearing a quality suit, the kind that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, but it was soaked through and he looked like he might collapse at any moment. "We need to get you inside somewhere," Keisha said, looking around desperately. The diner had just closed, the hardware store was dark, and there wasn't another open business on this block. The man gripped her arm suddenly, his fingers surprisingly strong despite his weakened state. "Heart medication," he whispered. "Need it. Left it in the car." That's when Keisha realized this wasn't just about helping someone find their way home. This was life or death. Keisha felt the full weight of the old man as he leaned against her, his knees buckling, and she had to brace herself to keep them both from going down onto the wet concrete. "Sir, stay with me," she said urgently, wrapping her arm around his waist and trying to keep him upright. He was taller than her by several inches and probably outweighed her by 60 pounds. And she could feel her own legs shaking from the effort of supporting him. The rain was relentless, running into her eyes, and she blinked hard, trying to see if anyone else was around who could help. The street was empty except for a few cars passing by without slowing down. She tried waving at one with her free hand, but it just splashed through a puddle and kept going. The man was mumbling something she couldn't make out, his head drooping forward, and Keisha knew she had to make a decision fast. She shifted her weight, managing to get her phone out of her pocket with one hand while still holding on to him with the other. Her fingers were slippery with rain as she pulled up the number for the local taxi service, the only option in a small town that didn't have Uber or Lyft. The phone rang 4 times before someone answered, and Keisha had to shout over the storm, "I need a taxi right now, corner of Main and 5th. It's an emergency. There was a pause, and then a man's voice, sounding skeptical. Who's this for? For me and someone who needs medical help, Keisha said. Please hurry. Another pause. You got money for the fare? The question stung, but Keisha swallowed her anger. Yes, I have money. Just please come now. She could hear the dispatcher talking to someone else. Then he came back on. 10 minutes, and the fare better be paid in full. No problems. Keisha wanted to scream at him that someone's life was at stake, but she just said okay and hung up. 10 minutes felt like forever as she stood there in the pouring rain, trying to keep the old man conscious and on his feet. He kept mumbling about his driver, about a meeting, about needing to get somewhere. But none of it was coherent enough for her to understand. She talked to him constantly, trying to keep him alert. What's your name, sir? Where are you staying? Can you tell me anything? He looked at her with unfocused eyes and whispered something that sounded like Theodore. Okay, Theodore. I'm Keisha. We're going to get you help. Just stay with me. When the taxi finally pulled up, Keisha felt a wave of relief that was immediately crushed when she saw the driver's face. He was a white man in his 50s with a thick neck and suspicious eyes, and the look he gave her and the old man made it clear what he was thinking. The driver rolled down his window about 3 inches. What's going on here? This man needs to get to his hotel, Keisha said, still supporting Theodore's weight. Has not well. The driver looked at Theodore, then back at Keisha, his expression hardening. How do I know you're not robbing him? Keisha felt her face grow hot despite the cold rain. I'm trying to help him. He collapsed. He needs his medication. I called you for help. The driver didn't move to unlock the doors. Let me see your money first. Keisha wanted to cry from frustration, but she carefully reached into her pocket and pulled out the wet bills, holding them up so he could see. $40. That's all I have, but it should be enough. The driver stared at the money for a long moment, then finally reached over and unlocked the back door. $40 better cover it, or I'm calling the cops. Keisha helped Theodore into the back seat, climbing in beside him to make sure he didn't slump over. The warmth of the car was a shock after the cold rain, and she realized she was shivering violently. Theodore seemed to be regaining a little bit of awareness, his breathing steadying slightly, and he gripped her hand with cold, wet fingers. Where to? The driver asked, watching them in the rearview mirror. Keisha looked at Theodore. Sir, where are you staying? The old man blinked slowly, seemed to gather himself, and managed to say, Colonial Inn. Keisha's heart sank. The Colonial Inn was on the far side of town, the expensive hotel where politicians and business executives stayed, where Shed never set foot because people like her weren't welcome there. The driver smirked. That's going to be at least $38. Keisha nodded, holding onto Theodore's hand as the taxi pulled away from the curb. The drive took 20 minutes through the flooded streets, and the whole time the driver kept glancing back at them in the mirror, his suspicion never fading. Theodore was slowly coming back to himself, his grip on Keisha's hand tightening, his breathing becoming more regular. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and whispered, Thank you. You saved my life. Keisha felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. Just rest, sir. We're almost there. When they pulled up to the Colonial Inn, the building was lit up like a palace, all glass and marble and chandeliers visible through the massive front windows. Keisha had passed by it 1,000 times but never imagined going inside. The meter read $38 exactly, and she counted out the bills with numb fingers, leaving her with just $3 and some change. The driver took the money without a word and didn't offer to help as Keisha struggled to get Theodore out of the car. She managed to get him on his feet and walked him slowly toward the entrance, his arm around her shoulders, both of them dripping water all over the pristine sidewalk. The automatic doors slid open, and they stepped into the warmth of the lobby, where a young white woman behind the desk looked up with a professional smile that froze when she saw them. The clerk's eyes went from Theodore's expensive but soaked suit to Keisha's cheap uniform and wet sneakers, and her expression shifted to something cold and suspicious. She picked up the phone immediately. We need security at the front desk. Keisha felt her stomach drop. No, wait. I'm just helping him. Has a guest here. The clerk ignored her, and within seconds, a large white security guard appeared, his hand resting on his belt near his radio. What's the problem? The clerk gestured toward them. This woman brought him in. I think something's wrong." The guard walked toward them with heavy steps, and Keisha instinctively backed up. But Theodore's weight kept her in place. The guard reached out and grabbed Keisha's arm, his grip tight and painful. "Let him go. What are you trying to pull here?" Keisha's voice came out shaky. "I'm not doing anything wrong. He needed help. I just brought him here." The guard's fingers dug into her arm harder, and she winced. He started to pull her away from Theodore, and that's when everything changed. Theodore suddenly straightened up, his voice cutting through the lobby with an authority that made everyone freeze. "Release her immediately." The guard hesitated, confused. "Sir, we're just trying to protect you." Theodore's eyes were sharp now, all traces of confusion gone. "I said release her. Now." The guard let go of Keisha's arm, and she stumbled back slightly, rubbing the spot where his fingers had been. Theodore looked at the clerk and the guard with an expression that was both exhausted and commanding. "This young woman saved my life. She found me in the storm, spent her own money to get me here safely, and you're treating her like a criminal. I want to know your names, and I want you to know that I'll be speaking to the owner of this hotel about your conduct." The clerk's face went pale. "I'm sorry, sir. We were just concerned." Theodore waved her off, then turned to Keisha. "What's your name?" "Keisha Williams," she managed to say. "Thank you, Miss Williams." He reached into his pocket, but of course, Head said he had no wallet. He looked frustrated, then said, "Wait here. Let me get to my room and I'll get you some money to replace what you spent." But Keisha was already backing toward the door, her heart pounding, her face burning with humiliation from the way she'd been treated. "That's okay. I'm just glad you're safe." And before he could say anything else, before anyone could stop her or ask more questions, or make her feel even smaller than she already did, Keisha turned and walked out into the rain, leaving puddles of water in her wake. Keisha's alarm went off at 5:58 the next morning, dragging her out of a restless sleep where she'd dreamed about drowning in endless rain. She'd only managed 4 hours of sleep after getting home past midnight, her uniform still damp, her body aching from exhaustion. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her tiny bedroom, thinking about the $3 left in her wallet. Her mother's medication was still sitting at the pharmacy, unredeemed, and the rent was due in 6 days. She dragged herself out of bed and got ready for the opening shift, pulling on her spare uniform and tying her hair back in a tight bun that made her temples ache. When she arrived at Riverside Diner at 5:58, the sun was just starting to turn the sky pink, and the parking lot was still wet from the storm. She let herself in through the back door and started the opening routine, her movements automatic after 3 years of doing the same thing every morning. The coffee machines needed to be started, the tables needed to be wiped down, the salt and pepper shakers needed to be refilled. By the time Dana arrived at 6:30, Keisha had everything ready, but something felt off the moment the manager walked through the door. Dana was usually cold and professional, treating Keisha with the bare minimum of civility required to avoid an outright confrontation. But this morning was different. This morning, Dana looked at her with something close to satisfaction, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth that made Keisha's stomach tighten with unease. "Morning, Dana," Keisha said, trying to keep her voice normal. Dana just nodded and walked past her to the office without a word. Keisha tried to shake off the feeling of dread as she finished the setup, telling herself she was just tired and paranoid. The first customers started trickling in at 7, the usual early birds who wanted coffee and eggs before work, and Keisha fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders and delivering food. Everything was fine until 7:15, when Trent Harper walked in. Trent was a regular who came in 3 or 4 times a week, always requested a table in Keisha's section, and always made her life miserable. He was a property developer in his mid-30s, with slicked back hair and expensive clothes that he wore like armor. He had money, and he made sure everyone knew it, snapping his fingers at waitresses and complaining loudly if anything wasn't exactly to his liking. But it was more than that with Keisha. Head made comments before, subtle digs about her intelligence, her appearance, her work ethic. 3 months ago, Head complained to Dana that Keisha had an attitude problem because Shed politely corrected him when he claimed Shed brought him the wrong order. Dana had written her up for it, and Keisha had learned to just smile and take whatever Trent dished out. This morning, though, Trent seemed even more aggressive than usual. He sat down at his usual table by the window and immediately snapped his fingers at her, not even looking up from his phone. Keisha walked over with her order pad and her best customer service smile. "Good morning, Mr. Harper. What can I get for you today?" He finally looked at her, his eyes cold and appraising. "How long's it going to take?" "I'm in a hurry." "It'll be quick," Keisha promised. "What would you like?" He rattled off a complicated order. 3 eggs over medium but not too runny, bacon crispy but not burned, wheat toast lightly buttered on both sides, hash browns extra crispy, and a coffee black with 1 ice cube to cool it down faster. Keisha wrote it all down carefully, repeated it back to him to make sure she had it right, and he just waved her away dismissively. When she brought his coffee 2 minutes later, he took 1 sip and made a face. "This tastes like dirt. Make it again." Keisha took the cup back without argument, poured a fresh one, and brought it back. He took another sip and shrugged, which was as close to approval as Shed ever get from him. His food came out 8 minutes later, cooked exactly to his specifications, and Keisha set it down in front of him carefully. He stared at the plate like Shed brought him garbage. "These eggs are too runny. This bacon isn't crispy. And these hash browns are barely cooked." Keisha looked at the food, which was perfect, exactly as Head ordered it, and felt her jaw tighten. "I can have them remake it if you'd like." Before he could answer, another customer at a nearby table spoke up, an older white man in a business suit. "Actually, miss, that looks perfectly cooked to me. The food here is always good." Trent shot the man a glare, and the customer quickly looked back down at his own plate. Trent turned his attention back to Keisha, his voice getting louder so other people could hear. "You know what your problem is? You people don't pay attention to detail. Probably too busy thinking about stealing tips from the other waitresses." The words hit Keisha like a slap, and she felt the other customers watching, the diner getting quiet. She kept her voice steady, professional, even though her hands were shaking. "I'll take this back to the kitchen and have it remade, sir." But Trent wasn't done. He reached for his coffee cup, picked it up, and then, as if in slow motion, deliberately tipped it over in Keisha's direction. The hot liquid splashed across the front of her uniform, soaking through to her skin, and she gasped and stepped back. Trent stood up, his voice ringing through the diner. "Now look what you did. You're so clumsy you can't even serve coffee without making a mess. Someone needs to fire you before you ruin someone else's breakfast." Keisha stood there, coffee dripping from her uniform, aware of everyone staring, and saw Dana standing by the counter, watching the whole thing with that same slight smile. Dana walked over slowly, taking her time, making sure everyone in the diner could see her being the manager, being in control. "Keisha, go clean yourself up, and then come to my office." Keisha nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked to the bathroom on legs that felt like they might give out. She grabbed paper towels and tried to blot the coffee from her uniform, but it was already stained, the smell of it mixing with her own sweat and fear. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper towels, and she stared at herself in the mirror, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes, the defeat already starting to creep in. She changed into her spare shirt from her locker, a plain white one that didn't match her black work pants but was the best she could do. As she was putting it on, Maria came in. Another waitress who had worked at the diner for 2 years. Maria was Latina, in her 40s, and had always been kind to Keisha in the small ways that mattered. Maria's face was tight with worry. "Keisha, honey, I need to tell you something. Trent was here when Dana arrived this morning. I saw them talking in the parking lot before we opened. They were out there for like 10 minutes. Keisha felt her stomach drop. "What were they saying?" "I couldn't hear, but Dana was nodding a lot and writing stuff down, and Trent looked real pleased with himself." Maria touched Keisha's arm gently. "Whatever happens in there, just know that some of us see what's going on. This isn't right." Keisha managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Maria, but we both know that doesn't matter." She walked to Dana's office feeling like she was walking to her own execution. The office was small and cluttered, with filing cabinets along one wall and a desk covered in papers. Dana was sitting behind the desk, and spread out in front of her was Keisha's employment file, looking thicker than Keisha remembered. "Sit down," Dana said, not looking up. Keisha sat in the chair across from the desk, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Dana finally looked at her, and there was something almost gleeful in her expression. We need to talk about your performance here. There have been numerous complaints. Keisha's mouth went dry. What complaints? Dana opened the file and started reading, her voice flat and businesslike. Multiple customers have reported slow service. You've gotten orders wrong on at least 6 occasions. You've been observed with a negative attitude toward customers. And there are concerns about your reliability. None of that was true. Keisha knew her record was spotless. She'd never gotten a single order wrong that wasn't immediately fixed. She'd never been late. She'd never called in sick. That's not accurate, Keisha said, trying to keep her voice steady. I've never gotten those complaints. Dana looked up with raised eyebrows. Are you calling me a liar? No. I'm just saying I don't remember any of those incidents. Can you tell me when they happened? Dana shuffled through some papers, pulling out what looked like customer complaint forms. Here's one from this morning, one from yesterday, one from last week, 2 from the week before that. Keisha leaned forward, trying to see the papers, and Dana turned them around so she could read them. The one from this morning was from Trent, no surprise there, describing her as incompetent and clumsy. But the others were supposedly from customers Keisha didn't recognize, complaining about things she didn't remember doing. One was dated last Tuesday, claiming she'd been rude and brought the wrong food. But Keisha hadn't even worked last Tuesday. She'd had the day off because her mother had a doctor's appointment. I wasn't working last Tuesday, Keisha said, her voice getting stronger. Check the schedule. I wasn't here. Dana barely glanced at the paper. The records show you were here. Maybe you're confused about the dates. I'm not confused. I had that day off. I can prove it. Dana's expression hardened. Are you really going to sit here and argue with me about your own poor performance? Because that's exactly the kind of attitude problem I'm talking about. Keisha felt the trap closing around her. Everything she said was being twisted, used against her. Dana wasn't finished. There's also the matter of the cash register. Yesterday, at closing, the register was short $40. Keisha felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't close yesterday. You did. Dana smiled that cold smile again. But you worked the last shift. You had access to the register all day. $40 is a significant amount. It's exactly the amount I spent on the taxi, Keisha thought. But didn't say. How could Dana possibly know about that unless someone had seen her at the Colonial Inn and reported back? But that was crazy, wasn't it? I didn't take any money, Keisha said firmly. I would never do that. Dana pulled out more papers, fanning them across the desk like playing cards. Multiple customer complaints, cash discrepancies, attitude problems, unreliability. She looked up at Keisha, and her voice dropped, became more personal, more cruel. The truth is, Keisha, your kind always causes problems. You come in here thinking you deserve special treatment, thinking the rules don't apply to you. But I run a tight ship, and I don't tolerate employees who can't meet basic standards. The words hung in the air, the racial undertones suddenly overt, undeniable. Keisha felt anger rising up through her fear, hot and sharp. My kind? Dana waved her hand dismissively. Don't try to make this about race. This is about performance. This is about you not being good enough for this job. Keisha tried one more time. I have perfect attendance. I've never been written up for anything legitimate. My customers like me. Ask any of them. The regulars always request me. Dana leaned back in her chair. The regulars you're thinking of don't matter. The people who matter, the people who spend real money here, they've complained, and I have to listen to them. She pulled out another document, and Keisha's heart sank when she saw what it was. Termination papers, already filled out, already dated with today's date. Dana slid them across the desk toward Keisha. You're done, effective immediately. And you won't be getting your final paycheck until we complete a full investigation into the missing register money. That could take weeks, maybe months. Keisha stared at the papers, at her own name printed there, at the signature line waiting for Dana's pen. She thought about her mother at home, needing medication. She thought about the rent due in 6 days. She thought about how she'd given her last money to help a stranger because it was the right thing to do, and how the universe was apparently punishing her for that kindness. You can't do this, Keisha said. But her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. Dana picked up a pen and signed the termination papers with a flourish. I just did. Now I need you to gather your things and leave. We'll mail you your final check once we finish the investigation, if there's anything left after we deduct the missing money. Keisha stood up, her legs somehow holding her weight even though she felt like collapsing. She looked at Dana. At this woman who'd been waiting for an excuse to fire her since the day she started. Who'd probably been working with Trent to set her up. The injustice of it was crushing, suffocating. Dana stood too, clearly enjoying this moment. You should probably think about going back where you came from. Find work that's more suited to your abilities. Keisha had been born in this town. Her mother had been born in this town. Her grandmother had been born in this town. But she didn't say any of that. Because what was the point? Through the window of the office, Keisha could see the diner beyond. Could see Maria watching anxiously from behind the counter. And then she saw something else. Someone else. An elderly man was walking through the front door, moving with surprising confidence for his age. He was well-dressed, his silver hair neatly combed, his suit expensive and perfectly tailored. He looked around the diner slowly, his eyes taking in every detail, as if he was inspecting it, as if he owned it. Keisha's breath caught in her throat. It was Theodore. The man from last night. The man Shed helped in the rain. He was here. Dana hadn't noticed him yet, still gathering up papers on her desk, still talking about how Keisha needed to turn in her key and her name tag. But Keisha couldn't look away from the window, watching as Theodore spoke to Maria at the counter. Maria was pointing toward the office. And then he was walking toward them, his steps purposeful, his expression unreadable. Dana finally noticed him when he was just a few feet away. She looked up, saw an elderly white man in an expensive suit approaching her office, and her expression immediately shifted to the obsequious friendliness she reserved for people she considered important. She opened the office door before he could knock, her voice syrupy sweet. Can I help you, sir? Theodore looked past Dana to Keisha, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Understanding. He looked at the termination papers still sitting on the desk. Then he looked back at Dana and said, in a voice that was polite but carried weight, "What's happening here?" Dana clearly didn't recognize Theodore from the night before. Why would she? She hadn't been there in the rain, hadn't seen him vulnerable and disoriented. She saw only what stood before her now, an obviously wealthy older gentleman who might be an important customer, or maybe a health inspector, or perhaps someone from corporate if there was such a thing. Whatever she thought, it made her smile wider and gesture at Keisha with a dismissive wave. "Oh, I'm just handling a personnel issue, sir. Nothing to concern yourself with. One of our employees hasn't been meeting our standards, so I'm letting her go. It's important to maintain quality, you understand." Theodore stepped fully into the office, and somehow his presence made the small space feel even smaller. He glanced at Keisha again, and she saw his jaw tighten slightly, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. What kind of standards aren't being met? Dana seemed pleased to have an audience, someone she perceived as being on her side. Well, there have been multiple customer complaints about her service. She's been unreliable, unprofessional, and there's been a cash discrepancy that we're investigating. $40 missing from the register. Theodore nodded slowly, as if considering this. May I see the documentation? Dana blinked, surprised. The documentation? Yes, Theodore said. The employee file, the customer complaints, the register reports. If you're terminating someone, I assume you have thorough documentation. Dana hesitated for just a second, but then her confidence returned. Of course we do. I keep detailed records of everything. She grabbed Keisha's file and handed it to Theodore, clearly eager to show off her managerial diligence. Here's her employment record, and here are the customer complaints we've received over the past few weeks. Theodore took the file and began reading through it carefully, his eyes moving over each page with meticulous attention. He asked questions as he read. This complaint here, dated last Tuesday. What shift was Miss Williams working that day? Dana glanced at the paper. Morning to evening, double shift. Theodore pulled out another paper from the file, the schedule. According to this schedule, she wasn't working that day at all. She was marked off. Dana's smile faltered slightly. Well, the schedule might have been changed. Sometimes we make adjustments. Do you have documentation of those adjustments? Theodore asked. Dana shuffled through some papers, her movements becoming less confident. I would have to check the other records. Those aren't in this file. Theodore moved to the next complaint. This one claims Miss Williams brought the wrong order and was rude when corrected. Who was the customer? Dana read the name off the paper. Michael Stevens. Is Mr. Stevens a regular customer? Theodore asked. Dana nodded. Yes. He comes in weekly. Theodore looked at her steadily. So you would recognize him if you saw him? Of course, Dana said. Theodore pulled out his phone, tapped something on the screen, and showed it to Dana. Is this Michael Stevens? Dana squinted at the screen and her face went pale. That's not him. That's the Michael Stevens whose name is on this complaint, Theodore said. I looked him up. He lives in California and has never been to Georgia. Dana's mouth opened and closed like a fish. There must be another Michael Stevens. There must be, Theodore agreed. But you just said you'd recognize the regular customer named Michael Stevens. And this photo is of the only Michael Stevens I can find associated with this town. Dana was starting to sweat now, small beads forming on her forehead. Look, sir, I don't know who you are or why you're questioning my management decisions, but this really isn't any of your business. Theodore ignored that and moved on to the register shortage. You said $40 was missing yesterday and Miss Williams had access to the register. Who actually closed the register and counted it? I did, Dana said. Alone? Yes, alone. That's my responsibility as manager. And where is the security camera footage from yesterday? Theodore asked. Donna's eyes darted to the side. The cameras weren't working yesterday. Technical issues. How convenient, Theodore said quietly. He kept reading, kept asking questions, and with each one, Dana's answers became weaker, her confidence crumbling. Keisha stood there watching, not understanding what was happening but afraid to move, afraid to hope. That's when Trent Harper appeared in the doorway of the office, drawn by the commotion. He looked at Theodore, and his face went strange, like he was trying to place him but couldn't quite manage it. What's going on here? Trent demanded. Theodore turned to him. Mr. Harper, I presume? You filed a complaint this morning about Miss Williams? Trent puffed up, clearly pleased to have another audience. That's right. She's incompetent, spilled coffee all over me and then tried to blame me for it. Theodore tilted his head slightly. That's interesting. The coffee spilled on her, not on you. I could see it from across the diner when I arrived. Trent's face reddened. What? Who are you anyway? Before Theodore could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately. Patricia. Yes, I'm here now. Send me everything. He listened for a moment, his expression hardening. All of it? Good. And get legal on standby. He hung up and looked at Dana. How long have you been manager here? 6 years, Dana said, her voice barely above a whisper now. And in those 6 years, how many employees have you terminated? Dana swallowed hard. I maintain high standards. I don't keep people who don't perform. How many? Theodore repeated. I don't know the exact number. Let me help you, Theodore said. He looked at his phone as it began buzzing with incoming messages. In the past 6 years at this location, 15 employees of color have been terminated. Only 2 white employees were fired in that same period. The average length of employment for white staff is 4.3 years. For employees of color, it's 7 months. He looked up from his phone, his eyes cold. Why do you think that is? Dana's mouth opened but no sound came out. Theodore wasn't finished. And these customer complaints against non-white staff. They're interesting. Most of them were filed by the same 3 people. He looked at Trent. You being one of them, Mr. Harper. You've filed 17 complaints in the past 3 years, all against employees of color, none of them substantiated by any other customer or by security footage. Trent's face was turning purple now. You can't just come in here and make accusations. Who the hell do you think you are? Theodore's phone buzzed again and he looked at the screen. His expression darkened further. And here's the security footage from yesterday. He turned the phone so both Dana and Keisha could see. The footage clearly showed Dana at the register after closing, alone, opening the cash drawer and removing 2 $20 bills, putting them in her purse. Dana made a strangled sound. Theodore looked at her with disgust. You stole $40 from your own register and blamed it on Miss Williams. Dana, you're terminated immediately. You'll be facing charges for theft and for systematic discrimination. Mr. Harper, you're banned from this establishment and all of our locations permanently." Trent took a step forward, his fists clenched. "Our locations? What are you talking about?" Theodore reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Dana with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to touch her more than necessary. "My name is Theodore Ashford. I own this diner. I own all 23 locations in this chain. And I'm going to make sure that what's been happening here never happens again." The color drained completely from Dana's face. Trent stood frozen, his mouth hanging open, and Keisha felt the world tilting sideways, unable to process what she was hearing. Theodore looked at her, and his expression softened. "Miss Williams, I owe you an apology. I owe you more than that. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you the position of manager here at this location. Effective immediately, with full back pay for today, plus significant compensation for the emotional distress you've suffered. Your starting salary would be $68,000 annually, with full benefits." The words didn't make sense. Keisha just stared at him, her brain refusing to accept what was happening. Dana found her voice, shrill and desperate. "You can't do this. This is favoritism. This is reverse racism. I'll sue." Theodore looked at her calmly. "Everything I've done here is documented. You're welcome to try. But I have footage of your theft, records of discriminatory termination patterns, and fabricated customer complaints. You'll lose. And more importantly, you'll lose publicly. Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." Security appeared at the door. 2 men Keisha had never seen before, probably from corporate. They escorted Dana out as she protested loudly, her voice fading as she was taken through the diner and out the front door. The other customers were watching with wide eyes, the whole scene playing out like something from a movie. Trent tried to follow Dana out, but Theodore stopped him with a word. "Mr. Harper, one more thing. I'll be sharing the documentation of your harassment pattern with the local business bureau and the Fair Housing Authority, since I understand you're a property developer. They might be interested in reviewing your practices for discrimination patterns." Trent's face went from red to white to red again. "You can't prove anything. I have 17 complaints filed by you over 3 years, all against people of color, none justified," Theodore said evenly. "I have security footage of you deliberately spilling coffee on Miss Williams this morning, and I have 3 other former employees willing to testify about your behavior. I think that's plenty." Trent stormed out without another word, and suddenly the office was quiet except for the sound of the diner beyond, where Maria and the other staff were standing frozen, watching everything unfold. Theodore turned his full attention to Keisha. She was still standing there, trembling, trying to make sense of it all. "Miss Williams," he said gently. "Keisha, may I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Keisha nodded mutely, not trusting her voice. Theodore gestured for the security staff to give them space, and they stepped out, closing the office door behind them. Through the window, Keisha could see the entire diner staff gathered near the counter, their faces showing various degrees of shock and confusion. Maria had tears on her cheeks. Theodore sat down in the chair that Keisha had been sitting in earlier, when her whole world was crumbling, and gestured for her to take Dana's chair behind the desk. The role reversal felt surreal. "Please, sit," he said. "You've been through a lot and you should be comfortable while we talk." Keisha sat, her legs grateful for the support. Her hands were still shaking, and she clasped them together in her lap. "Mr. Ashford," she started, but he held up a hand. "Please, call me Theodore. Or Theo if you prefer. Most people do." Keisha took a breath. "Theodore, I don't understand what just happened. How did you know? How did you have all that information?" Theodore leaned back in his chair with a tired sigh. "I built this business 40 years ago, starting with one small diner, not much bigger than a food truck. Over time, it grew. We expanded. Now we have 23 locations across 3 states, but somewhere along the way, I lost touch with what was happening on the ground. I delegated too much, trusted too much, stopped doing the kind of surprise inspections I used to do when we were smaller." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "Yesterday, I was in town for a quarterly review meeting with regional managers. My driver, James, had to rush home because his daughter went into labor early. I told him to go, that it'd be fine walking back to my hotel. It was only a mile. I've walked farther. But the storm came up so fast, and I didn't have my phone or my wallet because I'd left them in the car, thinking I'd just be gone for 20 minutes. He looked at Keisha directly now, and then my heart condition acted up. I've had arrhythmia for 5 years, usually controlled with medication, but stress and cold can trigger it. I was genuinely frightened. I couldn't remember where I was or how to get back to the hotel. And people kept walking past me like I was invisible. Keisha felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I saw you," she said quietly. "I know you did," Theodore replied. "You saw me, and you helped. Even though it cost you money you clearly needed. Even though in this town, helping an old white man could have brought you exactly the kind of trouble it did bring you. After you left me at the hotel, I had my assistant Patricia pull up information about the taxi driver who brought us. He remembered picking you up at Main and 5th, right by this diner. I realized you must work here. So this morning, I came to thank you properly and to offer you a reward for your kindness." He shook his head, his expression hardening. "But when I walked in and saw what was happening through that window, saw you standing there with termination papers on the desk, and that woman looking so satisfied with herself, I knew something was very wrong. So I called Patricia and had her pull every piece of data we have on this location. Employment records, termination reports, customer complaints, security footage, everything." Keisha wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "The $40 that was missing. That's exactly what I spent on the taxi." "How did Dana know?" Theodore's jaw tightened. "I suspect someone at the Colonial Inn mentioned it. Maybe the desk clerk, maybe the security guard. Small towns talk. Word got back to your manager that you'd spent money helping an old white man at an expensive hotel. She probably thought it made you look suspicious. Or maybe she just saw an opportunity to use it against you. Either way, she stole the money herself and set you up." Keisha felt a flash of anger cut through her shock. "Why? Why does she hate me so much?" Theodore was quiet for a moment. "Some people carry hate in them like poison, and they look for any excuse to spread it. In Dana's case, I suspect it's a combination of racism, insecurity, and the petty power that comes from being a manager in a small establishment. She could make your life miserable and face no consequences because I wasn't paying attention. That's on me." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression earnest. "Miss Williams, Keisha, I meant what I said. I want to offer you the manager position here, but I want you to understand what that means and what it doesn't mean. It means a significant salary increase, benefits, and the authority to run this location as you see fit. It means you'd be in charge of hiring, training, and creating the kind of workplace culture you want to see." Keisha felt overwhelmed. "I've never been a manager before. I don't have experience." "You've been working here for 3 years, Theodore said. "You know every aspect of this diner. You know the customers, the suppliers, the daily operations. And more importantly, you have integrity. You have compassion. You have the kind of character I want leading my restaurants." He paused. "But I won't lie to you. It will be hard. Some of your former co-workers might resent you for moving up so quickly. Some customers will refuse to accept you in a position of authority because of your race. Other managers in the chain might see you as a threat or as someone who got her position through unusual circumstances rather than traditional channels. You'll face challenges I can't entirely shield you from." Keisha thought about her mother at home, waiting for medication. She thought about the rent due in 6 days. She thought about the $3 in her wallet and the termination papers that had been sitting on the desk just minutes ago. And then she thought about something else. She thought about Maria out there, who'd been kind to her. She thought about the countless times she'd been treated as less than, as disposable, as someone whose complaints didn't matter. She thought about all the other people of color who'd been fired from this location over the years, their livelihoods stripped away by someone's prejudice. "If I take this job," she said slowly, "can I make changes? Real changes?" Theodore smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "That's exactly what I'm hoping you'll do." Keisha took a deep breath. "Then yes, I'll take it. But I need to know something first." "Why me? Really, why? I helped you last night. But that doesn't mean I'm qualified to run a restaurant. Why are you doing this?" Theodore was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. Last night, in that storm, 3 people walked past me before you came along. I was barely conscious, but I remember. 2 of them were white, a man and a woman, both young and healthy. They looked at me and kept walking. The 3rd person was a black woman, probably in her 60s. She saw me. She stopped. We made eye contact, and then she looked away and hurried past. He paused, and Keisha saw pain in his eyes. I don't blame her for that. I'm sure she had her reasons. Fear, probably. Fear that helping me would bring her trouble. And you know what? She was right. Look what happened to you for doing exactly what she was afraid to do. You helped me, and you lost your job. You helped me, and you were accused of theft. You helped me, and you were humiliated. But you did it anyway. He stood up slowly, like his joints ached. That's who I want running my businesses, Keisha. People who do the right thing, even when it's hard. Even when it costs them something. Even when they're afraid. Because that's the kind of character that can't be taught or faked. Either you have it, or you don't. And you have it. Keisha felt tears streaming down her face now, but she wasn't ashamed of them. She thought about all the times she'd been told she wasn't good enough, smart enough, professional enough. All the times she'd been made to feel small and powerless. And now this moment, this impossible moment where everything was being turned upside down. Theodore pulled a folder out of his briefcase that Keisha hadn't noticed him carrying. Inside are the details of your new position. Salary breakdown, benefits package, training schedule. There's also a signing bonus of $10,000, which will be transferred to your account today. You can use it for whatever you need. I suspect you have some immediate expenses. Keisha thought of her mother's medication and felt a sob catch in her throat. She swallowed it down. When would I start? Right now, if you're willing, Theodore said. Or you can take a few days to process everything. It's your choice. Keisha looked through the office window at the diner, at the staff still watching, at the customers who'd witnessed the whole drama. She thought about walking out of here, going home, trying to find another job in a town where word of what happened would spread like wildfire. Or she could stay. She could take this chance. She could prove that she deserved it. It'll start now, she said. Theodore smiled and extended his hand. Keisha shook it, his grip firm and warm, and she felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but possibility, the feeling that maybe the universe wasn't entirely cruel after all. Let me introduce you to the staff properly, Theodore said. And then I have some people I need you to meet. He opened the office door and walked out into the diner with Keisha following. Every eye in the place was on them. Theodore's voice carried easily across the space, authoritative but not unkind. Everyone, I'd like to introduce myself properly. My name is Theodore Ashford, and I own this diner chain. This company does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Not from managers, not from customers, not from anyone. If you experience or witness discrimination, you have multiple channels to report it, and those reports will be taken seriously. We're going to be making some changes in how we handle complaints and how we support our employees. Maria was the first to move. She walked over to Keisha and hugged her tightly, crying openly now. I'm so glad, honey. I'm so glad. The other staff members began coming over too, some congratulating her, others looking uncertain but at least not hostile. Keisha recognized their confusion. An hour ago, she'd been one of them, just a waitress. Now, she was their boss. It would take time to navigate that shift. Theodore gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. I'm going to step away and make some calls. Take your time here. When you're ready, I'd like you to come to the Colonial Inn at 2 o'clock. I have some people from corporate I want you to meet. And well, go over training procedures and the transition plan. Keisha nodded, still feeling like she was in a dream. Theodore left, and suddenly she was standing in the middle of the diner, her former workplace, now her domain. She took a deep breath and looked at the assembled staff. Maria, can you cover the counter for a bit? And Tony, take over the tables. I need a few minutes to process everything. They nodded and dispersed back to work, and Keisha realized that customers were starting to filter back in. The drama having passed. Life moving forward. She went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, staring at herself in the mirror. The same face Shed seen that morning, exhausted and defeated. But different now. Changed. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mama? No, I'm okay. Actually, more than okay. Something happened. Something impossible. I'm going to be able to get your medication today. And Mama, I got a promotion. I'm a manager now." She had to pull the phone away from her ear as her mother started crying and praising God and asking a million questions. Keisha promised to explain everything when she got home and hung up, smiling despite the tears on her own face. She spent the rest of the morning observing the diner, watching how things ran, noticing problems Shed always seen but never had the authority to fix. The coffee machine needed maintenance, the seating chart was inefficient, the supply closet was a mess. Small things that added up to bigger inefficiencies. At 1:30, she changed out of her uniform into regular clothes from her locker and walked to the Colonial Inn. The same desk clerk from the night before was there, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Williams," the clerk said nervously. "Mr. Ashford is expecting you. Conference room B on the second floor." Keisha thanked her and walked through the lobby that had felt so intimidating last night. Today, it was just a hotel. Nice, but not threatening. She found the conference room and knocked. Theodore opened the door and welcomed her in. Inside were 3 other people, 2 women and a man, all dressed professionally. Theodore made introductions. "This is Patricia, my assistant, David, our legal counsel, and Jennifer, who handles human resources for all our locations." Over the next 2 hours, they went over everything. Her employment contract, which she read carefully with David's help, making sure she understood every clause. Her benefits package, which included health insurance, retirement contributions, and tuition reimbursement if she wanted to pursue further education. Her training schedule, which would include 3 weeks of intensive management training at their corporate office in Atlanta, starting next month. Patricia explained that the $10,000 signing bonus had already been transferred to her account, and she showed Keisha the confirmation on her phone. Keisha had never seen that many zeros in her balance before. Jennifer talked about the changes they'd be implementing across all locations in response to what had happened. Better oversight, multiple channels for reporting discrimination, regular audits of termination and complaint patterns, and mandatory training on bias and workplace culture. "Your experience is going to help us fix systemic problems we didn't know we had," Jennifer said. "I'm sorry it took this to make us pay attention." By the time they finished, it was after 4 o'clock, and Keisha's head was spinning with information. Theodore walked her to the lobby. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrified," Keisha admitted, "but also excited. I think I can do this." "I know you can," Theodore said. "And remember, you're not alone. You have support. Use it." As Keisha walked back toward her car in the diner parking lot, her phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "The whole staff wants to take you out for drinks tomorrow night to celebrate. Say yes." Keisha smiled and texted back a yes. She drove home, where her mother was waiting with a huge smile and dinner already cooking. They sat together and Keisha told her everything, start to finish. And her mother cried and laughed and kept hugging her. That night, lying in bed, Keisha thought about the past 24 hours. She drove to work in a used Honda Civic that was 5 years old but ran reliably. No more waiting at bus stops in the rain. Her mother's diabetes was under control, the medication cabinet full, and Shed actually gained a little weight back, looking healthier than she had in years. The tiny apartment they'd lived in for so long had been replaced with a modest 2-bedroom house they were renting on the nicer side of town, with a small yard where her mother had planted tomatoes and herbs. But the biggest changes were at work. The first 2 weeks had been rough, exactly as Theodore had warned. 2 of the staff members had quit immediately, making it clear they wouldn't work for a black manager. One of them had said it directly to Keisha's face. "I don't take orders from your kind." Shed smiled politely and processed their resignation papers without comment. 3 other staff members had been skeptical at first, watching her every move, waiting for her to fail. But Keisha had worked those first weeks like Shed never worked before. She was first to arrive and last to leave. She learned the management systems, the ordering procedures, the scheduling software. She made mistakes and owned them. She made decisions and stood by them. She treated everyone with respect but didn't tolerate disrespect in return. Slowly, grudgingly, most of the staff came around. Maria had become her unofficial second-in-command, helping train new hires and keeping the kitchen running smoothly. They'd let go 2 employees who'd been consistently late and unreliable, something Dana had apparently tolerated. They'd hired 4 new people, including 2 young black women and a Latino man, who all brought energy and fresh ideas. The customer base had shifted too. Some of the regular customers, the ones who'd been friends with Trent Harper, had stopped coming. Keisha didn't miss them, but new customers had started showing up, word having spread about what happened. People of color from surrounding towns made special trips to eat at the diner where a black woman was running things. Business had actually increased by 18% over the previous quarter. Theodore had been true to his word about support. He called her every Friday afternoon to check in, to answer questions, to offer guidance. Head visited twice, both times unannounced, sitting in the corner booth and watching how things ran. After the second visit, Head sent her an email with one line: "You're exceeding expectations. Keep going." The management training in Atlanta had been intense, but invaluable. 3 weeks of coursework on everything from inventory management to conflict resolution to financial planning. Shed met the other location managers, a mix of people from different backgrounds, and had formed genuine connections with several of them. They'd created a group chat where they shared ideas and supported each other. But it hadn't all been easy. There had been incidents. A customer Wad refused to let her take his order, demanding to speak to a white manager. Shed calmly explained she was the only manager, and Head left in a huff. A supplier Hode tried to shortchange them on a delivery, assuming Keisha wouldn't notice or wouldn't have the authority to push back. Shed caught the discrepancy, called the company, and got it corrected. A visiting inspector who'd been unnecessarily harsh in his critique, until Shed pulled out her detailed records and showed him that the diner was actually exceeding health code requirements in every category. Each challenge had made her stronger. Each small victory had built her confidence. Shed learned to trust her instincts, to speak up, to take up space. Today was special. Theodore had called her 2 days ago with news. The company was holding a regional recognition ceremony, something they did quarterly to honor outstanding employees. This time, it was being held at the Riverside Diner, and Keisha was receiving the award for excellence in leadership and community impact. The local newspaper was sending a reporter. It was a bigger deal than Keisha had realized at first. The diner was packed by 3 o'clock, with staff from other locations, corporate representatives, regular customers, and community members filling every seat. Her mother sat in the front row, wearing her Sunday best, tears already streaming down her face. Maria stood near the back, grinning. Theodore was at the makeshift podium that had been set up near the counter, speaking into a microphone. 3 months ago, he was saying, I walked into this diner and witnessed an injustice that had been going on for far too long. But I also witnessed something else. I witnessed the character and resilience of a young woman who refused to be broken by that injustice. He gestured to Keisha, who stood off to the side, feeling self-conscious in the new dress Shed bought for the occasion. Keisha Williams has transformed this location in just 3 months. Revenue is up, employee satisfaction is up, customer satisfaction is up. But more importantly, she's created a workplace culture built on respect, dignity, and excellence. She's proven that when you give people a real opportunity and real support, they rise to the occasion. The room applauded, and Keisha felt her face grow warm. Theodore continued, talking about specific changes Shed implemented, praising her attention to detail and her leadership. Then he called her up to receive the award, a crystal plaque that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Keisha took the microphone with shaking hands and looked out at all the faces watching her. She saw people Shed worked with for years, people Shed just met. People Wode doubted her, and people Wode believed in her from the start. She cleared her throat and spoke. 3 months ago, I was standing in an office being told I wasn't good enough. Being told that people like me don't belong in positions of responsibility. Being told to go back where I came from. She paused, letting that sink in. Today, I'm standing here as the manager of this diner and 4 others. I'm standing here because one person saw past my race and my circumstance and saw my character. But I'm also standing here because I refuse to believe what I'd been told about my worth. She looked directly at her mother. I'm standing here because my mama raised me to work hard and treat people right. I'm standing here because of everyone who supported me when I needed it most. And I'm standing here to say that if you're facing discrimination, if you're being told you're not enough, don't believe it. You are enough. She felt tears in her eyes but kept going. This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued. It's proof that things can change, that justice can win, that one act of kindness, one moment of courage, can change everything. The applause was thunderous, and Keisha stepped down from the podium into her mother's embrace. The newspaper reporter approached after a few minutes, asking questions and taking photos. Other people came up to congratulate her, to share their own stories of discrimination, to thank her for being an example. By the time the crowd thinned out, it was after 6 o'clock. Keisha was exhausted, but in the best way, the kind of tired that comes from something meaningful. She was helping clean up when she noticed someone standing near the entrance, an elderly black woman, probably in her late 60s, hesitating like she wasn't sure if she should come in. Keisha walked over. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled nervously. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you must be tired. I just wanted to meet you." Keisha gestured to a nearby booth. "Please, sit. Tell me your name." They sat, and the woman folded her hands on the table. "My name is Dorothy Patterson. I live over on Cedar Street. I saw your picture in the paper this morning. Read about what happened to you and what you did with this place." Keisha waited, sensing there was more. Mrs. Patterson took a breath. "I was there that night. The night of the storm. I saw the old man, Mr. Ashford, struggling on the sidewalk." Keisha's breath caught. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. "I stopped. I looked at him. And then I walked away. I was afraid. Afraid that if I helped a white man, someone would accuse me of something. Afraid the police would be called. Afraid of all the things that have happened to people like us when we try to help." She wiped at her eyes. "I've regretted it every single day since. I prayed about it. I asked God to forgive me for being a coward. And then I saw what happened to you. How you helped him, and then lost your job, and how he came back and made things right. And I realized that you were braver than I was." Keisha reached across the table and took the woman's hands. "You weren't a coward. You were protecting yourself." "That's not the same thing." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "Maybe. But you showed me something. You showed this whole town something. My grandson, Marcus. He got hired at your location over in Riverside Park last week. First job he's ever had, where nobody questioned whether he belonged there. First time he came home from work smiling instead of angry." She squeezed Keisha's hands. "You did that. You changed things. Not just for yourself, but for all of us." Keisha felt tears streaming down her face now. "Thank you for telling me that. But you should know something too. I was terrified that night. I almost didn't stop. I'm not some fearless hero. I'm just someone who made a choice." Mrs. Patterson smiled through her tears. "That's what makes it matter. You were afraid and you did it anyway. That's what real courage is." They talked for another 20 minutes, sharing stories, finding connections. Mrs. Patterson's grandson wasn't the only person whose life had been touched by the changes at the diner. Word had spread through the black community that this was a safe place, a fair place. People were applying for jobs here who would never have considered it before. When Mrs. Patterson finally left, Keisha sat alone in the booth for a few minutes, looking around the diner that was now hers to run. She thought about the rain that night, how it had felt like the world was washing away, how she'd been so tired and scared and desperate. She thought about Theodore collapsing against her, trusting her to help when he couldn't help himself. She thought about every moment since then, every challenge and triumph, every small victory that had built into something bigger. The rain hadn't just washed away a storm that night. It had washed away the old version of herself, the one who thought she had to make herself smaller to survive. It had washed away the barriers she'd thought were permanent. It had washed away the lie that people like her didn't deserve better. And in the washing away, it had revealed something new, a future she hadn't dared to imagine, a chance she hadn't known existed, a life where her courage mattered more than her fear. 6 months after that ceremony, Keisha was standing in the corporate office in Atlanta, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Theodore sat at his desk behind her, going over paperwork. But she could feel his eyes on her occasionally, watching her reaction to what he was about to propose. She'd been managing 5 locations for 3 months now, traveling between them, implementing systems, training managers, solving problems. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Every location was showing improvement. Employee retention was up across the board. Customer satisfaction scores were climbing. And she'd discovered something about herself she hadn't known. She was good at this, not just competent but genuinely talented at seeing what needed to change and making it happen. Theodore cleared his throat. "Keisha, I need to talk to you about something important." She turned from the window and sat in the chair across from his desk. "What is it?" "I'm retiring," he said simply. Keisha felt her stomach drop. "When?" "End of next year. I'll be 80 by then, and I've been doing this for 40 years. It's time." She didn't know what to say. Theodore had been her mentor, her advocate, her safety net. The thought of navigating this company without him felt terrifying. But he wasn't finished talking. "I need someone to take over. Someone who understands what this company was supposed to be about. Someone who has integrity and vision and isn't afraid to make hard decisions." He slid a folder across the desk to her. "I want it to be you." Keisha stared at the folder without touching it. "Me? You want me to run the entire company? 23 locations. 300 employees." "Yes." Keisha felt like she couldn't breathe. "Theodore, I've only been a manager for 6 months. Most of the other managers have been doing this for years. They have more experience." Theodore leaned back in his chair. "Experience isn't everything. Some of those managers have been running their locations the same way for a decade, never questioning whether there's a better approach. You've shown more innovation and leadership in 6 months than they've shown in years. But more than that, you understand what matters." He tapped the folder. "This isn't a decision I'm making lightly. I've talked to the board. I've reviewed all the data. I've considered every option. You're the right choice. And if you're worried about pushback from the other managers or from employees who think you're too young or too inexperienced or, let's be honest, too black for this position, let me be clear. I'll handle that. I'll make sure you have the support you need." Keisha opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a detailed proposal. Timeline for transition. Salary that made her eyes water. Responsibilities broken down by quarter. A plan for how she'd move from regional manager to chief operating officer to eventually CEO when Theodore fully retired. "This is too much," she whispered. "You're overwhelmed," Theodore said gently. "That's normal. But tell me honestly, do you want this? Not because I'm offering it, but because it's what you want for yourself." Keisha thought about that night in the rain, about helping Theodore because it was right, without knowing what it would lead to, about standing in Dana's office feeling powerless and then watching that powerlessness transform into power, about Mrs. Patterson telling her that her courage had changed lives beyond her own, about her mother's pride every time someone called Keisha by her title, about the young black teenager Wood applied for a job because she'd seen someone who looked like her in charge and thought maybe she could belong there too. "Yes," Keisha said. "I want this." "Then it's yours," Theodore said. Keisha closed the folder and looked at him. "Why me?" she asked again, the same question she'd asked 6 months ago. "Why really?" Theodore smiled. "Because you're someone who stops in the rain." The transition took the rest of that year. Keisha went through intensive training, shadowing Theodore in meetings, learning the corporate side of the business, meeting with the board of directors, proving herself again and again. There was resistance, exactly as Theodore had predicted. 2 board members tried to block her promotion. 3 location managers threatened to quit. Some longtime employees circulated a petition claiming she was unqualified. But Theodore stood firm, and the numbers didn't lie. Under her management, the locations were thriving. Employee complaints were down 70%. Revenue was up across all her locations. Customer reviews were overwhelmingly positive. The resistance faded. Not because people changed their minds about her race or her age, but because they couldn't argue with results. By the time the official announcement was made that Keisha Williams would be taking over as CEO when Theodore retired, it felt inevitable. The day she moved into the CEO office, 1 year after that night in the rain, Keisha stood in the same spot by the window where Shed stood when Theodore first offered her this path. The city sprawled below her, full of people living their lives, chasing their dreams, facing their struggles. Her mother had come to the office to see it, walking slowly because her knees bothered her but smiling so wide it lit up the room. "Baby," she said, touching Keisha's face. "I always knew you were special. I just didn't know the world would ever see it too." Keisha hugged her mother tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume and the peppermints she always carried. "Thank you for raising me right, Mama, for teaching me that character matters more than circumstances." That night, alone in her new office after everyone had gone home, Keisha sat at the massive desk and thought about everything that had changed. She thought about the girl who'd counted $33 in tips and thought it would never be enough. She thought about the woman who'd helped a stranger in the rain and lost everything because of it. She thought about the manager who'd stood in front of a room of people and refused to be ashamed of who she was. And she thought about the CEO she was becoming, with the power to make real change, to create opportunities for people who looked like her, to prove that excellence had no color. Her phone buzzed with a text from Theodore. "How does it feel?" She texted back. "Terrifying. Perfect." His response made her smile. "That's how you know you're doing something that matters." Keisha looked at the photo on her desk, the one from the award ceremony, showing her holding that crystal plaque with her mother beside her, and Theodore in the background smiling. She thought about Mrs. Patterson and her grandson Marcus. She thought about Maria, who was now an assistant manager at the original location. She thought about every person who'd been overlooked or underestimated or told they didn't belong. She picked up her phone again and opened her notes app, starting to write. Plans for the next year. Diversity hiring initiatives. Scholarship programs for employees, children. Partnership with historically black colleges to create management training pipelines. Expansion of the anti-discrimination policies. Creation of an employee council to give staff at all levels a voice in company decisions. The list grew, idea after idea, change after change. The work ahead was massive and she knew there would be setbacks and challenges. But she also knew something else. She knew that courage mattered, that kindness mattered, that one person choosing to do the right thing could start a ripple that spread farther than they could ever imagine. The rain had washed away more than just a storm that night. It had washed away every excuse, every limitation, every lie she'd been told about her worth. And what remained was the truth. That she was enough. That she always had been. That everyone deserved the chance to prove what they could become when someone believed in them. As she sat there in the quiet office, the city lights twinkling below, Keisha made herself a promise. She would be that person for others. She would see past circumstances to character. She would stop in the rain for those who needed help. She would build something better than what she'd inherited. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And somewhere in the night, rain began to fall again. Gentle this time, washing the city clean, full of promise for tomorrow. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return, only to have that kindness come back to you in ways you never imagined? Or maybe you've been on the other side, where someone's simple act of compassion changed your entire path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Share your experiences of unexpected kindness, moments when courage mattered more than fear, or times when standing up for what's right made a difference. If Keisha's journey inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of doing what's right, even when it's hard. And don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear that they're enough, that their character matters, and that one moment of courage can change everything. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that a better world is possible when we choose kindness over fear. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right, keep helping those who need it, and remember that your courage can create ripples of change far beyond what you can see. Stay blessed.